electricity physics. Now, we know that energy exists in different forms like solar energy, wind energy, thermal energy, etc. So in the same way, electricity is also one of the basic form of energy. Electricity is generated, transmitted, and then converted into different forms of heat, lights, and other forms of energy through natural processes and through the device built by us. One example of natural process which produce electricity is like the lightning which you see, the spark which is produced. That is the natural process which produces electric. And the device built by us like battery, cell, generator, dynamo, etc. These are the devices which produce electric. Now, electricity is associated with electric charge. And electric charge is the fundamental particles of matter. So we all study about the matter in the lower class. And the matter is made with tiny particles, we call it molecules, and the molecule consists of atoms. And the atom is made with electron, proton, and nucleus, right? So let me just write only the electrons and the protons. So electron and proton. So charge is the fundamental, charge is the physical property of this fundamental particles. So what is the fundamental particles of atom? Electrons and the protons. So this charge is the property of this electrons and the proton. It's a physical property of electrons and the proton. Now let's study how electrons are charged. Okay, there are two kinds of charge. Okay, electrons and the protons. Protons are positively charged and the electrons are negatively charged. So there are two kinds of charge. Now, just now I told you that there are two kinds of charge. We have two kinds of charge. Positive charge and negative charge. So protons are positively charged, electrons are negatively charged, denoted by the positive sign, plus sign, protons, and the electrons minus negative sign. So we have two kinds of charge, positive and the negative charge. Now, so this positive charge, this protons and electrons, how are they acquire this property of charge? Let's learn more precisely. Consider two atoms of different substance. Let's say we have atom A and let's say we have atom B. And if, let's take an hypothetical example here. Atom A has an electron, has a number of electrons, let's say 11, and a number of protons 11. So what happened here? Since the number of electrons and protons are equal here, they are equally balanced here, so there is no charge. So the net charge of this atom is 0. Atom B has, let's take an example, it has an electron 16, and let's say proton, number of protons here is 16. In the same way, atom B also has equal number of electrons and protons, so they are equally balanced, so there is no charge. So in atom B also the net charge is 0. 0 units. Okay. Now, if we take these two atoms of different substance and if we rub it, what happens? Some amount of heat is developed. And what do we study in the lower class? In the atoms, electrons are reigns in the orbit, and electrons are freely electrons can move freely around its orbit in the atom. So some amount of heat is developed here, which allows the electrons to move from one atom to another. Let's see here. So during the rubbing, let's rub these atoms. So during the process of rubbing, what happened here? One electrons get transferred from atom A to atom B. So after rubbing here, what happens? Atom A has the number of electrons 10 and the number of protons 11. See the difference here. Before rubbing, the number of electrons and protons are equally balanced. So after rubbing, the number of electrons becomes 10. So one electron has already been transferred to atom B. So atom A loses one electron. So this atom A becomes positively charged because the number of protons is more than the electrons here. So the net charge of atom A is, since one electron has been transferred from here, so 1 unit charge. So the net charge of this total atom becomes 1 unit positive plus 1 unit. So it's positively charged. Atom B, if you look at it here, number of electrons here becomes 17. Before rubbing, the number of electrons was 16. So after rubbing, this atom B gain one extra electrons from the atom A, gets one extra electron. So the number of electrons get increase here, and the number of protons in this atom B is 16. Now this atom B becomes negatively charged. So the net charge of this total of this atom -1 unit, since 1 electron has been transferred from here to here. So the net charge becomes -1 unit. So this atom B becomes negatively charged and this becomes positively charged. So what do we understand from here? We understand that the fundamental particles of atom, electron and protons are positively charged, electrons are negatively charged. So this positively and negatively charged are the physical property of this electrons. This electric charge is a physical property of the electrons and the protons, and this charge is due to the transfer of electrons. Okay, so the basic concept from here we learn is that charging of a substance depends on the losing and the gaining of the electrons. Now, one example of charging of a substance is like when you take a comb and rub with a dry hair. What happens? After some time you will observe that this comb acquired a property of attracting the small bodies, like the small pieces of paper. So this comb, after rubbing, when you bring it near the small pieces of paper, what happens? The small bits of paper, small pieces will attract towards this comb. So what happened here is that when you rub it, some amount of heat is developed in that comb, and the electrons in that comb become free to move. So when you bring closer to this piece of paper, some of the electrons were transferred from the comb to the paper, and the paper attract towards this comb. So the number of electrons become less in the comb, so the number of protons become more. So the comb become the positively charged, and the paper which gain or receive electrons from the comb becomes negatively charged. So this is one of the best examples of charging of a substance. Now, the phenomenon which gives attracting power to this body is called electricity. So this phenomenon is known as the electricity. And the bodies are said to be electrified or charged. Means when you rub it, what happens? The electrons get transferred from one to another. So that phenomenon is called the electrify, or that we call it charge. Charge is denoted by the letter Q. The SI unit of charge is coulomb, represented by the capital C. The magnitude of charge is denoted by the symbol E, and the value of this charge is 1.6 into 10 to the power minus 19 coulomb. Means one electron has a charge of 1.6 into 10 to the power minus 19 coulomb. So electrons and protons has the same charge, 1.6 into 10 to the power minus 19, but electron is negatively charged, so it is represented by the minus. So the small letter E represents the magnitude. Okay, this E means the charge, the magnitude of this electron, whose value is minus 1.6 into 10 to the power minus 19 coulomb. See, now let's understand the two properties of the electric charge. Like charge repel, unlike charge attract. See, in the same way, like if you take two magnets, let's say we have two magnets. Here we have one magnet. A magnet has two poles, north pole and the south pole. Okay, so here we have another magnet which has north pole and the south pole. So what happens here, if you bring these two poles of the magnets, the same pole, closer to one another, what happens? There is some force acting on this north pole and this north pole, so it will push one another, which means repel. So same pole of the two magnets will repel. So, but if you bring the north pole and the south pole, means these two poles are not same, so unlike pole. So if you bring the unlike pole of the two magnets closer to one another, then it will attract. So this same property of magnet, the electric charge has the same property. So if you bring the positive charge and another positive charge closer to one another, then it will repel or it will push one another. But if you bring closer the positive charge and the negative charge, means electrons and the protons, if you bring closer to one another, then it will attract. Okay, so proton and proton, it will repel if you bring it closer to one another, but if you bring electrons and the proton closer, then it will attract. So these are some of the properties of the electric charge.
Stay home, stay safe, do it for self, live for family, live for India.